Buried beneath layers of dust in Clarence House, a sealed trunk marked "Private, Eyes Only" has just revealed King Charles's most guarded secret. Inside, handwritten journals spanning decades expose a mind consumed by jealousy, guilt, and obsession. From chilling confessions about Diana to bitter reflections on William and Camilla's rise, these pages aren't just personal, they're explosive. The monarchy may never recover from what's been unearthed. One thing is clear: these words were never meant for the public eye. The discovery nobody was meant to see. It was during a quiet document relocation effort in January 2025 that royal archivists unearthed something they weren't meant to find. A sealed leather trunk buried beneath layers of dust in the Clarence House cellar bore a chilling label: "Private, Eyes Only." The trunk, untouched since the late 1990s, belonged to King Charles III, and inside were dozens of bound journals spanning the 1980s and 1990s. These weren't diplomatic records or scheduled memos. They were private reflections, angry rants, and tortured thoughts from a man caught between public duty and personal disintegration. Handwriting analysis conducted by palace archivists confirmed the pages matched Charles's known penmanship from the 1985 to 1996 period. But this wasn't calm, collected writing. It was erratic. Whole pages were blackened with ink. Diana's name appeared over 40 times in one volume alone. Words were underlined repeatedly: betrayal, isolation, thief of hearts. The psychological tone was volatile. Experts reviewing the material described it as the emotional rawness of a fractured air. There were even moments where Charles referred to himself in the third person, calling himself the Forgotten Prince. The journals had been hidden on purpose. Several pages were written in coded phrases, resembling diary encryptions used in aristocratic circles during the 19th century. One document was wrapped in parchment and sealed with melted wax, bearing the initials CPW, Charles Philip Windsor. Upon discovery, palace aides attempted to remove the trunk before external archivists could inspect it, but not before several pages were copied. Within 72 hours, select scans surfaced on encrypted whistleblower channels and then spread across social media. Public reaction was swift and divisive. Some viewed the entries as the anguished voice of a man under extreme pressure. Others saw it as further proof of manipulation, insecurity, and bitterness toward Diana and her enduring legacy. Inside the palace, the discovery sparked alarm, leading to an internal lockdown of related documents and the sudden reassignment of the staff involved. But by then, the damage was done. Yet what shook insiders the most was not the discovery itself, but what these journals revealed about Charles's fixation with image, resentment, and an overwhelming insecurity that only grew as Diana's star rose. Obsession with public image and deep insecurity. Charles's private writings reflect a man tormented not by his duties, but by how little the public seemed to love him in comparison to his wife. In multiple entries from 1987, 1990, and 1994, he wrote lines like, "She steals the light meant for me, and my legacy is eclipsed by a performance." These weren't passing frustrations, they were recurring wounds. Charles tracked newspaper polls religiously, recording headline counts and mentions per week. In one scathing entry dated June 1991, he called Diana a media weapon aimed at the heart of the crown. He didn't only document media figures, he plotted strategies. Several entries refer to Project Balance, a PR effort believed to have been launched in 1992, involving meetings with press officers, television producers, and political allies. He detailed a plan to push stories that questioned Diana's emotional consistency while elevating his own role in environmental and educational work. One entry from October 1993 reads, "I must direct the light she commands. It will not bend unless forced." The language is calculated, cold, and entirely focused on public perception. Even more disturbing were his notes about William. While Charles occasionally praised his son's intelligence and natural charisma, he often followed such praise with sharp warnings. One entry read, "He mirrors her. That charm is dangerous." In 1995, Charles scribbled that he felt boxed in by another blonde heir, referring to both Diana and William as faces that sell smiles. Analysts reviewing the journals noted a pattern. Charles equated love with loyalty and popularity with power, making any public affection toward Diana a direct threat to his throne. His insecurity was not limited to headlines. He resented Queen Elizabeth for what he perceived as a lack of support. He wrote, "Even my mother favors the myth of Diana over the reality of me." These thoughts weren't fleeting. They were fixations. The journals show that Charles saw public image as warfare. And to him, Diana was winning. That belief drove him deeper into secrecy, bitterness, and ultimately, desperation. But in the shadows of this battle with Diana, another figure emerges repeatedly in the pages, quiet, constant, and calculating. The shadow behind the throne. Though much of the public didn't fully grasp Camilla's role in Charles's life, until 1995, these journals suggest her presence was far more influential, and far earlier. As far back as 1983, Charles was writing about private meetings and late-night calls with Camilla. In a journal entry dated November 1986, he referred to her as his anchor in chaos, but she was more than comfort. She was counsel. "She reminds me that I am king, even when the world forgets," he wrote. Charles envisioned a future with her long before it was politically viable. "She will reign beside me, not behind," he wrote in 1989. Camilla appears repeatedly as the strategist behind the scenes, encouraging Charles to reclaim the throne in public hearts. Multiple entries refer to covert press strategies, anonymous quotes, and subtle image sabotage, allegedly crafted with Camilla's input. A particularly damning passage from 1994 states, "Her whisper carries more weight than Diana's scream." It hints not just at emotional support, but at coordinated efforts to shift public narratives. The journals also portray Camilla as a mirror to Charles's bitterness. He described her as the only one who truly understands the throne's pain. Together, they saw the monarchy not just as an institution, but as something that had betrayed them both. He wrote, "In her eyes, I see the crown I should have worn already." These reflections cast Camilla not as an accidental mistress, but as a co-conspirator, one deeply invested in reshaping royal legacy. Perhaps most chilling were the notes written just before Diana's infamous 1995 Panorama interview. Charles wrote of a shared vow with Camilla. "We hold firm, the storm is hers, the crown is ours." That entry, now public, has reignited fury among Diana supporters. It paints a picture not of two people in love, but of two people plotting. Shocking views on parenting. If the revelations in Charles's journals about his personal insecurities were troubling, his reflections on fatherhood crossed into emotionally jarring territory. In several entries dated between 1986 and 1994, Charles described Princess Diana's influence on their sons as ideologically dangerous. He accused her of indoctrinating them with softness, and once referred to kindness as a weakness that has no place in the future of the crown. For a man raised under Prince Philip's military-style parenting, Charles saw Diana's warmth not as virtue, but as vulnerability. One entry from March 1991, just after a joint public appearance with William and Diana, described his discomfort at how easily William connected with crowds. Charles wrote, "They love him already. The air loves her. I am the third shadow behind them both." His frustration was not with William's behavior, but with his emotional closeness to Diana. Several pages later, he called it a dangerous inheritance, suggesting William's charisma could one day threaten the monarchy's control. He even wrote about considering how to reframe his son's image to ensure it aligned with duty, not compassion. More chilling, however, were his comments about Harry. In a 1993 journal entry, Charles referred to him as a ginger echo of chaos. He questioned Harry's temperament, academic struggles, and spontaneous emotional reactions. The tone was one of deep unease. In one controversial passage, he mused on the notion of legacy and bloodlines, writing, "The world will always ask, I try not to." While he never directly stated suspicions about paternity, the insinuation has reignited long-standing public speculation, especially in light of his referring to Harry as the unfixed variable. Yet perhaps most disturbing was how fleeting Charles's moments of guilt were. After acknowledging his emotional absence during key family milestones, he quickly returned to blame. "She used the boys as shields," he wrote in 1995, referring to Diana. He claimed her public displays of affection were performative weapons designed to isolate him emotionally and politically. These reflections challenged the carefully cultivated image of Charles as a wounded but loving father. Instead, the journals portray a man locked in competition with his own children for attention, affection, and control. But Charles's emotional turbulence didn't end with his children. The journals go on to reveal how deeply fractured his relationship was with nearly every senior royal, including his parents. Private loathing for key royal figures. Behind palace walls, appearances often mask deep resentment, and Charles's journals pulled back the curtain with startling honesty. His entries about Prince Philip are laced with pain and contempt. He called his father unyielding, militaristic, and disrespectful of emotional burdens. In a 1988 entry, he wrote, "I was raised on drills, not dialogue." The coldness between them, documented in these pages, mirrors what biographers have long speculated but were never able to confirm, that Charles never truly felt accepted by his own father. The Queen did not escape criticism either. Though Charles often acknowledged Queen Elizabeth II's lifelong commitment to duty, his words paint a picture of a son starved for warmth. In a series of entries from the early 1990s, he lamented, "She sees me as her subject, not her successor." The Queen's refusal to publicly defend him during his darkest media years, particularly amid the collapse of his marriage, was a recurring grievance. "To her, I remain her child, not her king," he wrote in 1992. Perhaps most prescient were his observations about Prince Andrew, years before public scandal consumed the Duke of York. As early as 1985, Charles referred to his younger brother as a disaster in waiting. He questioned Andrew's judgment, financial decisions, and addiction to excess. In hindsight, these warnings now appear tragically accurate, highlighting a foresight that may have gone unheeded. His comments about Princess Margaret were equally scathing. He called her a relic of rebellion soaked in red wine, suggesting she had become a liability to the monarchy's public image. These entries confirm what insiders have long whispered, that the royal family, though presented as a united institution, was fractured by rivalry, jealousy, and bitterness. Far from being the dutiful, restrained future king portrayed in the media, Charles was quietly simmering with anger toward almost every senior member of the House of Windsor. The journals suggest he viewed his role not as a blessing, but as a burden unfairly judged by people who never offered him the empathy he desperately sought. That inner fury didn't stay confined to private pages. Charles began to craft plans, not just to survive the monarchy, but to reshape it entirely on his own terms. Plotting a new monarchy. Among the most politically explosive sections of the journals are entries describing what Charles called his vision for a refined monarchy. These entries, spanning from 1990 to 1998, show a man no longer content with inheritance. He wanted transformation. The central idea, a monarchy stripped of Diana's influence, media sentimentality, and what he referred to as emotive theatrics. He envisioned a return to old-world hierarchy, led not by charm, but by conviction. His preferred image, a monarchy ruled with quiet strength, echoing Victorian discipline over modern celebrity. Camilla, unsurprisingly, played a key role in this reimagining. He described her as the monarchy's restoration, believing her stoic persona and background in aristocracy made her more fit for queen than Diana ever was. In 1994, Charles wrote, "She is the spine. Diana is the smile." One particularly revealing entry details a plan to discreetly shift public empathy toward Camilla through carefully timed documentaries, charity appearances, and interviews. By 1997, just before Diana's death, Charles was already laying the groundwork for what would become his eventual marriage to Camilla. The journals show a man actively plotting the architecture of his reign decades before it began. He wrote about disengaging from spectacle and focusing on religious symbolism, historical rituals, and closed-door diplomacy. He suggested cutting back on emotive PR, including televised interviews and emotional disclosures, things Diana had mastered. Charles wanted control of the monarchy's narrative, and he viewed modern media as a battlefield where Diana had once won, but where he could reclaim power using structure, not spontaneity. What's most alarming is how far these ideas mirrored later reality. From the soft reintroduction of Camilla into royal life to the eventual bestowal of the title Queen Consort in 2023, the arc of Charles's vision unfolded almost exactly as these journal entries predicted. Historians now question whether much of what the public believed to be natural evolution was, in fact, decades of strategic planning. A vision built not on love, but on legacy reconstruction. Disturbing emotional confessions. As the archivists turned the final pages of the journals, they encountered passages unlike anything before. Entries no longer rational, no longer measured, but raw eruptions of despair. Between 1993 and 1996, Charles's tone veered from self-pity to prophecy. He described nights spent wandering the gardens of Kensington Palace, alone, weeping under the lights of the fountains while hearing Diana's laughter echoing from crowds beyond the gates. "They cheer her because she makes them forget," he wrote, "and I was born so they would remember." The pages spiral into emotional disarray. He called himself invisible, trapped, and cursed by lineage. At one point, he wrote of being erased by my own crown. What alarmed psychologists reviewing the journals was his shifting sense of self. Sometimes he wrote as Charles, other times as the heir, and once simply as the shadow. Analysts later called this identity diffusion, a sign of deep emotional fracture. He confessed to hearing Diana's name even in his sleep, a word that cuts through silence like thunder. There were also chilling references to visions and alternate timelines. In a June 1995 entry, months before Diana's famous Panorama interview, he described seeing the monarchy crumble beneath a mother's revenge. Another passage mentioned a dream where he watched a throne dissolve into dust as the crowd turned toward a woman in white. The tone was almost prophetic. Royal psychologists later concluded these writings revealed symptoms of untreated narcissistic depression, exacerbated by isolation, guilt, and competition with Diana's immortalized image. One haunting line appears near the final entries before 1997. "The crown I wear is too heavy for the man beneath it." It is unclear whether he wrote these words before or after Diana's tragic death, but they seem to foreshadow his emotional collapse. The journals reveal a man who, despite immense privilege, was consumed by resentment, envy, and loneliness. A monarch built on fractures the world was never meant to see. But the deepest cracks in his soul were always tied to one name. And those final pages, his last thoughts about Diana, would leave readers shaken. Guilt and bitterness. Nearly one-third of the journals focus exclusively on Diana. Some passages glow with admiration, others burn with bitterness. In entries from 1982, the year after their marriage, Charles called her sunlight in silk, praising her empathy and connection with people. Yet by 1987, the language had curdled into venom. "She plays her part too well," he wrote. "The crown bends to her smile." His resentment wasn't just personal, it was existential. He feared the monarchy itself might one day orbit around her memory, not his authority. He accused her of weaponizing grief, particularly after their separation. In 1995, he described her famous Panorama interview as the betrayal that sealed my fate. He claimed Diana turned private agony into public theater. Later pages soften briefly, showing flashes of regret. "I could have loved her better," one line reads, "if I'd known how." But almost immediately, bitterness returns. She never wanted love, only an audience. The emotional back and forth is painful to read, revealing a man torn between remorse and resentment. The most unsettling entries came after August 31st, 1997, the night of Diana's death. "She has won at last," Charles wrote. "The world will never forgive me." Some words were smudged with moisture, possibly tears, yet a few lines later, he shifted again. "History will forget her chaos, but not mine." He seemed to oscillate between guilt and anger, love and loathing. The duality in his tone, mourning her while resenting her legacy, echoes a truth the monarchy has long concealed: that Diana's death didn't free him, it chained him to her memory forever. Psychologists reviewing these sections describe them as grief weaponized against itself. The final line in his Diana-focused entries reads simply, "She was never mine, not even for a moment." It is both confession and curse, and it may be the most honest thing Charles ever wrote. But while the words themselves are damning, what happened after their discovery proved even more explosive. For the palace, containment became a losing battle. Royal advisors and the cover-up. Even before the public knew of the journals, senior royal aides were already working to bury them. According to leaked internal emails and testimonies, top advisors had known of the journal's existence since at least 2019. One memo, labeled Private Archives, Emotional Content, classified the writings as unsuitable for historical preservation. Palace staff were ordered to seal, store, and suppress. Aides feared their release would irreparably damage the monarchy's moral authority. Sources confirm that several of Charles's most trusted counselors urged him to destroy the journals entirely before his May 2023 coronation. "They are wounds in ink," one advisor allegedly said. But Charles refused. He insisted they remain sealed for future generations to understand the burden. That decision backfired. When the trunk was rediscovered in 2025, the old cover-up mechanisms collapsed. Copies leaked within days. And now even high-ranking staff are turning whistleblowers. One former royal press secretary described the journals as a scandal wrapped in a tragedy. He revealed that a discreet internal task force was formed, codenamed Archive Aegis, to track and retrieve any leaked pages. A separate legal team began drafting emergency injunctions to block publication. But technology moved faster than secrecy. Screenshots circulated worldwide before the palace could act. The monarchy found itself fighting an information war it couldn't win. Today, whistleblowers within Clarence House claim there are still more volumes hidden, over 40 notebooks spanning 3 decades, and that what's been seen so far is only a fraction. "They're afraid of what's in the rest," one source said, "because this was the king before the crown, and it's not a man they want the world to see." But with the truth now spreading faster than any royal decree can contain, the question haunting Britain is no longer what's inside the journals. It's what happens next. What happens next? Impact and consequences. The fallout from the journal leak has been nothing short of seismic. Within a single week of their appearance online, public approval of King Charles III dropped by 17%, marking the steepest decline for a reigning monarch in modern polling history. The tone of conversation across Britain has shifted, from quiet loyalty to moral outrage. For millions still devoted to Princess Diana's legacy, these journals are not the reflections of a misunderstood man. They're evidence of bitterness that never died. Inside the palace, the atmosphere is tense. Legal teams are working round the clock to trace the source of the leaks, while aides scramble to frame the documents as unauthorized drafts or contextless emotional therapy. Meanwhile, members of Parliament have reportedly begun informal discussions about constitutional implications, whether a monarch's private writings, once public, could erode their impartial standing under British law. One senior MP called it the most significant crisis of moral confidence since the abdication of 1936. Prince William and Catherine have remained publicly silent, though palace insiders describe them as devastated and disturbed. For William, the journals are more than political scandal. They're deeply personal wounds reopened. He has reportedly demanded all copies of his mother's references be archived under royal protection to prevent further desecration. The contrast between his composed silence and the chaos around his father has only amplified public sympathy toward the younger generation. For Charles, the damage may already be irreversible. His lifelong effort to control perception, to shape a dignified image of redemption, has collapsed under the weight of his own words. Each line of those journals paints not the image of a noble king, but of a fragile man haunted by jealousy, regret, and self-made ghosts. And the British people, once patient with royal drama, now face an unavoidable truth. Their king's greatest enemy was never the media, never Diana. It was himself. As these haunting journal entries circulate across the globe, the illusion of royal perfection unravels. King Charles's own handwriting now casts a shadow over his crown, one even centuries of tradition may not erase for the British public. It's a reckoning. For William and Catherine, it's a painful vindication. And for Diana's memory, It's a powerful resurgence because sometimes the most damning truths aren't whispered by enemies, they're written by the monarch himself.